Taiwan. They've been doing all these air drills. They've been building amphibious vehicles. They are very clearly prepping to go in, right? You're the intelligence colonel. I'm an idiot corporal. What are they doing?
Well, they've set up a military that they think could have a reasonable chance of success if it attacks Taiwan. The analysts will differ on this. Some say, well, they're not quite there yet, or it's too hard to do amphibious operations. These kind of assaults, they're too complex. And unspoken as well, the Chinese just aren't smart enough to figure these out. Well, the Chinese are as smart as us, and in some ways they're even smarter, so I wouldn't underestimate them. But I think the People's Liberation Army has set itself up, developed capabilities that would make its leadership, or what really matters is make Xi Jinping think that if they use force against Taiwan, they just might have a chance of success, particularly if you combine that with a threat to the United States along the lines of, this is a domestic matter, you steer clear, or it's nuclear war. Depending on who's in the White House, you just might get the Americans to back off. But I would note that the Chinese would rather get Taiwan without fighting. And the Taiwanese presidential election that's coming up in January 2024 is very important. If really a pro-China candidate wins, China just might back off and expect him to deliver Taiwan, however unwillingly for most of the citizens. But if the candidate from the party that wants nothing to do with Chinese enslavement wins, then I think the gloves are off, and I would say that an armed attack on Taiwan is likely. So I would pay a lot of attention to early 2024. But in my opinion, the PLA has the capability to make life pretty darn miserable for Taiwan if they decide to have a go against them.
Colonel, I'm sure a bunch of people out there are a little surprised to hear you say China would have a chance at success. They look at China as this big, angry communist bear, really the new Soviet Union in the world, and they look at this wee little island of Formosa, or Taiwan as we now call it, and they think, wow, that's got to be no contest. Should be 30 seconds and it would be over. Why do you say reasonable chance of success instead of an absolute rout?
Oh, I don't think there's ever been a war that turned out exactly like people thought it would, for one thing. But you can make Taiwan a pretty darn tough nut to crack. If China goes after Taiwan, say it loses all of its navy in a couple afternoons, that's some problems. But a lot does depend on if the Americans get involved. If the Americans do, they can cause the Chinese military no end of trouble. But also consider that a fight for Taiwan is unlikely to be a narrowly confined thing, just to the area around Taiwan, with rules and limits, etc. But if you expand the battlefield, China has suddenly got some huge problems. It doesn't import nearly enough food, nearly enough energy to take care of its needs. It's absolutely dependent on exports to earn the dollars that it needs for everything that it has to pay for in real money. And it is vulnerable, say, to this sort of a cut in its imports, etc. And nobody's going to want to do much business with China if it does go after Taiwan. So it'll be free to deal with North Korea and Iran and Russia. But the China that is so dependent actually on foreign markets, they will find themselves without those things. So if America plays it right, and our military is still strong, it needs to sort of get better in certain key areas, but it could cause the Chinese a lot of trouble if it does things right. But also, as I said, spread the battlefield, and suddenly China is going to find itself headed back towards an agrarian society, like it was a long, long time ago. But that said, they've got a lot of nerve, and if they smell weakness, they just might try something.
Colonel, I can't see them waiting until the possibility of Joe Biden being out of the White House before they attempt something like this. I've maintained this for a while. Am I crazy in that? I just don't see how they would ever risk even the possibility of facing a Trump White House again or a DeSantis White House. Why would you wait until Joe's gone?
Oh, if you can get Taiwan subverted, and they've done a very good job of that actually over the last 50 years. If you can get Taiwan to feel just demoralized and tired and just like it has no chance, you could get basically a Taiwanese turncoat in office who can take a country where most people don't want to go. But what you've just stated, you could be right. One thing I do always caution when people expound on Taiwan and what's coming, everybody has their scenario of what's going to happen, and I've probably heard a dozen ones that are plausible. But so always keep that in mind, that nobody quite knows how this is going to play out. But I would say that China does have the military capability to think that they could go after Taiwan, and maybe have some prospects for success, especially if the Americans don't join in. But whether or not China will wait, well, I say that's debatable. I think they will at least wait until January 2024. And then after that, they'll make their calculations about the U.S. domestic situation. And it all gets weighed in, or factored in. And if they see in a confused America, say there's rioting in the streets because an unauthorized candidate doesn't win the election, suppose we haven't got our financial house in order by then, inflation's still very serious. Suppose Ukraine is a problem, still a problem, distracting us. Well, they may think that, well, even if it's a Republican, say, in the White House, they've still got some time to make their move. But we're at this point we're just trying to make predictions. But what you've laid out could happen. I just see it a certain way, and it's not all that different. But I do think we're headed for trouble in the near future, say within a couple of years at least.
Colonel, thank you so much. I appreciate you, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I could be so optimistic about things, but hopefully we'll get out
I'm glad
of this.
Please, if you don't mind, tell people where they can get your book, if you don't mind. That was outstanding.
Sure. It's usually it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble as well. Okay. So the usual online places. It's even in bookstores. And what I've tried to do is to give my take on the question after 40 years looking at the matter from military, diplomatic, investment banking, and the high-tech industry. So think of it as somebody looks up at that spy balloon a couple months ago and says, what is going on? Well, this book kind of helps you understand what's going on.
I like it. Colonel, appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.